Welcome in, because these Lincoln cents may look ordinary, but together they tell the story of a remarkable American life, and hidden differences in condition, rarity, varieties, and preservation can make some examples far more interesting to collectors than others. In this investigation, we'll examine all four designs and uncover what separates everyday coins from truly collectible pieces. First coin. There is something unusually fascinating about the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Formative Years penny. It looks like an ordinary modern cent, yet the tiny scene on its reverse captures one of the most important stages in Abraham Lincoln's development, and certain authenticated examples can become dramatically more desirable than their 1-cent denomination suggests. This is the second of four completely different reverse designs issued during 2009, a year that celebrated both the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the original Lincoln cent. Instead of showing Lincoln as president, the coin takes us back to Indiana, where the young Lincoln spent formative years from 1816 through 1830, learning, working, reading, and developing the habits of self-education that would later become part of his public identity. The U.S. Mint officially released the formative years design on May 14, 2009, and the reverse was specifically created to represent Lincoln educating himself while taking a break from his work as a rail splitter. Later, we will examine what authenticated examples have actually sold for, why some specimens can move into the thousands of dollars while ordinary circulated pieces remain inexpensive, and which combination of grade, color, variety, strike quality, originality, and authentication makes the difference. The important point is that the date alone does not create rarity. The real story begins when you examine exactly which version of the coin you have and how well it survived more than a decade and a half after leaving the mint. The historical setting behind this reverse is essential because the mint was not simply decorating a penny with a random portrait of Lincoln. Public Law 109-145 authorized the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial 1-cent program, and the four reverses were deliberately arranged as a visual biography. Lincoln's birth and childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. The formative years design, therefore, occupies a very specific chapter in that story. The reverse shows a young Lincoln seated and reading, with the tools and atmosphere associated with his labor as a rail splitter in the background, creating a contrast between physical work and intellectual development. That contrast is what gives the design its appeal to collectors. The coin is not merely commemorating a famous president, but illustrating the idea that education and determination were developing alongside hard manual labor. Sculptor-engraver Charles Vickers designed and sculpted this reverse, while the obverse continued Victor David Brenner's familiar Lincoln portrait that had defined the cent since 1909. The timing was also significant. In 2009, the United States was dealing with the aftermath of the severe financial crisis and recession, while the Mint was simultaneously producing a major commemorative circulating series that put Lincoln's life into the hands of millions of Americans. The result was a coin that was historically important, widely distributed, and immediately recognizable, but whose collector value would eventually depend on how individual pieces survived the enormous production and circulation process. Technically, the circulating formative years cent is a modern copper-plated zinc coin, not the solid bronze composition associated with many earlier Lincoln cents. It weighs 2.5 grams, measures approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge. PCGS lists the standard Philadelphia formative years issue at a mintage of 376 million pieces, while the Denver issue carried a D mint mark and had a reported mintage of 363,600,000. The circulating composition is approximately 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating, which is important because that surface can behave very differently from the copper-rich cents collectors are accustomed to seeing. The Mint also produced special uncirculated versions using a composition associated with the original 1909 cent, containing 95% copper with tin and zinc, meaning collectors must be careful not to assume every 2009 cent has identical metal characteristics. During production, the zinc core is manufactured into planchets and receives a copper plating before striking, after which enormous pressure forces the obverse and reverse designs into the metal between dies. That process is why the finest coins can display crisp lettering, sharp design elements, clean fields, and strong overall detail, while heavily circulated pieces quickly acquire marks, discoloration, surface damage, and wear. The mint mark also matters because a Philadelphia piece normally has no mint mark, whereas a Denver example carries the small d, allowing collectors to distinguish the two major circulating production sources. But a mint mark by itself does not make one automatically rare. The much more important question is how scarce a particular grade or variety becomes once surviving coins are examined closely. That is where the collector value story becomes much more interesting. With hundreds of millions of formative years cents produced between Philadelphia and Denver, the ordinary circulated example is not a scarce coin in the traditional sense. You can still encounter them, and many show the expected abrasions, dulling, discoloration, or copper plating damage associated with years of handling. Yet condition rarity can completely change the equation. A modern coin may have a huge original mintage, but a surprisingly small population at the very highest grades, because the coins were produced for circulation, transporting in bulk, struck against one another, placed into bags or rolls, and exposed to countless opportunities for contact marks. The finest examples are judged using the familiar mint state scale, with MS60 representing an uncirculated coin and progressively higher grades reflecting better preservation and fewer distractions, while the red designation becomes especially important for copper-colored surfaces. Brown, and red classifications describe the coin's remaining original coloration and can make an enormous difference among high-grade Lincoln cents. A spectacular red specimen with pristine surfaces, strong luster, and excellent strike quality can be far more desirable than a technically similar coin that has turned brown or developed spots. As an example of how far the premium can go, a standard 2009 Philadelphia formative years specimen certified MS67 has an auction record of $1,995 in the PCGS Coinfax record, although that result should not be interpreted as the normal value of the issue. A collector encountering an ordinary circulated penny should therefore not assume it belongs anywhere near that level. Those prices reflect exceptional certified preservation and a very different market segment. The real treasure hunt begins when you turn your attention from ordinary condition to die varieties and documented errors. The formative years design is known with several recognized double die reverse varieties, including FS801 and FS802, along with additional attributed varieties catalogued by specialists. A genuine doubled die is not simply lettering that looks blurry or a coin that appears slightly doubled because of machine damage. The important distinction is that a doubled die originates during the die-making process and creates a specific, repeatable secondary impression in parts of the design. This is why attribution matters. One particularly important example is the 2009 formative years FS802 double die reverse in red condition. PCGS records an MS67 red FS802 example that sold for $2,750 in 2020, demonstrating how a recognized variety combined with exceptional grade can push a modern penny into a completely different price category. More recently, Heritage Auctions reported a certified PCGS MS67 red FS802 with a population of 14 at that grade and none finer in its cited population data. That example sold for $823.50 on May 5, 2026. Those two auction results also demonstrate an important lesson. Even genuinely scarce varieties do not have one permanent price. Auction timing, certification, population data, bidder competition, eye appeal, and market conditions can all influence the final result. A dramatic price attached to one certified variety should never be presented as a guaranteed value for every 2009 formative year's penny. Another major factor is the difference between a coin that merely looks unusual and one that can survive professional authentication. Modern cents can develop plating blisters, scratches, dents, die deterioration, strike weakness, machine doubling, environmental discoloration, and other abnormalities that may initially appear valuable to an inexperienced collector. Machine doubling is particularly important because it can imitate the appearance of a doubled die without being the same type of collectible variety. For serious evaluation, the coin should first be examined under good lighting with magnification, preferably around 5x to 10x, while avoiding excessive handling of the surfaces. Collectors should inspect the reverse lettering, especially areas associated with recognized double die diagnostics, compare the coin against reliable variety references, and weigh it if authenticity or composition is in question. A standard circulating piece should be close to its 2.5 gram specification, although normal tolerance and equipment differences must be considered before drawing conclusions. Professional grading services can authenticate the coin, assign a numerical grade, and identify certain recognized varieties, giving the marketplace a much stronger basis for comparison. Counterfeits are less common in inexpensive modern cents than in major rarities, but valuable varieties can attract altered or fabricated pieces, so the higher the claimed value, the more important professional verification becomes. A supposed $3,000 penny that has not been authenticated is not equivalent to a certified coin with a documented variety and grade. That distinction is fundamental in numismatics because rarity is not established by appearance alone. It is established through attribution, authentication, condition, and evidence that other knowledgeable collectors can independently evaluate. Preservation is equally important because the very characteristics that make a top-grade 2009 formative years cent desirable can be destroyed by careless handling. Copper-plated zinc cents are especially vulnerable to environmental problems, and once the thin copper surface is damaged, the underlying zinc can become exposed and begin reacting with moisture and contaminants. Collectors should hold valuable examples by their edges, avoid rubbing or polishing them, and never attempt to improve the appearance with household cleaners, abrasive materials, oils, or chemical treatments. A coin that looks brighter after cleaning can actually become less desirable because original surfaces and natural mint luster are part of its collectible character. For important pieces, an inert archival quality holder or professionally graded encapsulation offers much better protection than loose storage in a pocket, envelope, or ordinary plastic container. Stable temperature and humidity are preferable, and coins should be protected from direct exposure to moisture, chemicals, and extreme environmental changes. These precautions matter because a coin's future value is heavily tied to preservation. A hypothetical formative years cent that began as a superb red mint state coin could lose significant collector appeal if fingerprints, spotting, corrosion, or improper cleaning permanently alter its surfaces. Conversely, a coin that has remained exceptionally clean, sharply struck, original in color, and free from distracting marks can attract serious attention. The market has demonstrated that elite examples can reach into the thousands. For instance, a 2009 formative years MS69 Red was reported by PCGS with a $2,040 heritage auctions result from May 4, 2025. That does not mean every 2009 cent approaches $2,040. It shows how extraordinary preservation at the highest certified levels can create a completely different market. Ultimately, the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Formative Years Penny is a perfect example of why serious coin collecting is not simply about finding an old-looking coin or seeing a familiar date. Its enormous production numbers make ordinary circulated pieces readily available, yet its finest surviving examples, recognized double-die varieties, unusual authenticated errors, and top-level certified specimens occupy a much narrower collector market. The difference can be enormous. One ordinary circulated coin might be worth little more than face value, while a genuinely rare and authenticated variety in elite condition can enter the hundreds or, in exceptional cases, the low thousands of dollars. The documented FS 802 results demonstrate that range clearly, with certified high-grade pieces reaching four-figure territory, while another certified example brought a substantially lower amount only a few years later. That variation is not a contradiction. It is how the rare coin market works. Collectors evaluate the exact die variety, mint of origin, grade, color designation, strike, surface quality, population, certification, provenance, and current demand rather than simply paying for the date. The coin's historical importance also gives it a lasting advantage. It connects the pocket change of 2009 with a young Lincoln in Indiana, balancing physical labor with self-education at a pivotal stage of his life. The Formative Years Reverse was released as the second chapter in a four-part visual biography, and its combination of historical storytelling and modern numismatic variety makes it far more interesting than its 1-cent denomination suggests. If an example appears unusually sharp, unusually red, unusually clean, or shows possible doubling, the correct response is not to assume it is rare, but to slow down, compare it carefully with established diagnostics, protect the surfaces, and seek professional attribution when the evidence warrants it. That is where the real value of this penny is found, not in the number printed on a price tag, but in the combination of history, scarcity, condition, authenticity, and collector demand that turns an ordinary-looking cent into a genuinely significant piece of Lincoln numismatics. Next coin. There is a curious contradiction built into the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial cent bearing the professional life reverse. Hundreds of millions were made for ordinary commerce, yet the very best authenticated examples can command the kind of attention normally associated with much older coins. At first glance, it is simply another Lincoln cent from a year most Americans remember for four different reverse designs, but look more closely, and the coin becomes a miniature portrait of Lincoln's transformation from an ambitious young Illinois lawyer into a national political figure. The reverse places Lincoln before the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois, the setting associated with his work in the Illinois legislature and his emergence as a lawyer, politician, and public speaker. The United States Mint released this third design into circulation on August 13, 2009, as part of a program created to commemorate both the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth and the centennial of the Lincoln cent itself. That historical purpose gives the coin an importance that goes beyond its denomination, but history alone does not determine its market value. Later, the real numismatic questions become much more demanding. Which mint produced the coin? How well was it struck? How much original red color remains? Whether the surfaces are genuinely uncirculated, whether a recognized variety is present, and whether the coin has been professionally authenticated and graded. Those details explain why 2 cents that look nearly identical to a casual observer can occupy completely different levels of collector interest, and they are the reason this particular 2009 design deserves a much closer examination than its 1 cent face value might suggest. The story begins with legislation that transformed the Lincoln cent for a single extraordinary year. Public Law 109-145 required 4 different reverse designs during 2009, each representing a major period in Lincoln's life. His birth and childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and his presidency in Washington, D.C., the professional life coin was therefore not an isolated artistic experiment. It was the third chapter of a carefully planned visual biography. By the time Lincoln reached Illinois, his life had changed dramatically from the frontier environment represented on the earlier coins. He had become a lawyer, legislator, debater, and increasingly important political figure. The United States Mint chose Springfield's old state capitol as the setting because it connected the coin directly with that period of development. Lincoln served in the Illinois General Assembly and practiced law in Springfield, and his political career in the state helped establish the reputation that eventually carried him onto the national stage. The design was created by United States Mint Artistic Infusion Program master designer Joel Uskovutz and sculpted by Mint sculptor engraver Don Uvcut. Uskovutz originally envisioned Lincoln holding a rolled piece of paper, but the concept was modified before production, leaving the final circulating coin with Lincoln standing and just young beside the Capitol. That change illustrates an important reality of coin design. An image must not only tell a historical story, it must also survive the physical demands of being compressed into a tiny metal surface millions of times. The finished coin combines an old portrait with a completely new reverse. The obverse retains Victor David Brunk's familiar Lincoln likeness, the same basic portrait that had appeared on the cent since 1909, with "In God We Trust" above Lincoln, Liberty behind him, and the 2009 date in front of him. On the reverse, Lincoln stands before the Illinois State Capitol, with United States of America surrounding the upper rim, EPLUBUSUNUM beneath the building, and 1 cent along the bottom. The initials JI and DE identify Joel Uskovutz and Don Uvcut near the lower portion of the design. Symbolism is subtle but powerful. This is not Lincoln the president carved into history after the Civil War. It is Lincoln while he was still building the professional identity that would eventually lead to the White House. Technically, the standard circulating version is a modern copper-plated zinc cent. It weighs approximately 2.5 grams, measures 19 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. The zinc core is covered with a thin copper layer, giving the coin its familiar copper appearance without making it a solid copper cent. That distinction becomes important when examining condition, because the copper surface can suffer from scratches, spots, environmental damage, and plating problems that may dramatically affect eye appeal. Collectors also need to distinguish the circulating coin from special collector versions. The Mint produced uncirculated examples using the older 95% copper composition, meaning a 2009 professional life sent from a special collector striking can have different physical characteristics from the ordinary copper-plated zinc coin found in circulation. The numbers initially make this coin look anything but rare. The Philadelphia circulation issue, identified by the absence of a mint mark, had a reported mintage of 316 million pieces, while Denver produced 336 million bearing the D mint mark. Those figures are large enough that the ordinary professional life cent should never automatically be described as a scarce coin. Millions entered circulation, passed through banks, cash registers, vending machines, pockets, jars, and coin-counting machines, and many were eventually mixed into collections simply because 2009 was a memorable Lincoln year. Yet modern coins have a special kind of rarity that can be easy to overlook: condition rarity. A coin can have hundreds of millions of examples struck, while still being difficult to locate in truly exceptional preservation. During production, freshly struck cents were handled in enormous quantities, transporting in bulk, and exposed to contact with other coins. Tiny marks that would barely matter on an ordinary circulated cent can become decisive when collectors compare coins at the upper end of the mint state scale. A coin graded MS-65 can look remarkably clean to the naked eye, while an MS-67 or MS-68 example may have the extraordinary combination of smooth fields, strong luster, sharp detail, and minimal contact marks demanded by the modern high-grade market. This is where the market begins separating common survival from exceptional survival. The Philadelphia issue, for example, has a documented PCGS condition census headed by MS-67 red pieces, with the finest listed examples standing far above the ordinary coins encountered in circulation. A collector seeking a top-quality example is therefore competing not for the existence of the coin itself, but for a particularly small fraction of surviving coins that escape the damage normally inflicted during production and distribution. Culk adds another layer to that competition. Because the circulating professional life cent is copper-plated zinc, its original bright copper appearance can change with exposure to handling and the environment, and professional grading services classify Lincoln cents according to the amount and quality of remaining original coloration. The familiar designations are brown, red-brown, and red, with red generally representing the most desirable preservation of original copper coloration. A coin that has turned brown is not automatically damaged or unattractive, but when two otherwise comparable mint-state pieces are competing for advanced collectors, a vivid original red example can carry a substantially stronger premium. Luster matters as well. Freshly struck coins can show the characteristic cartwheel effect created by microscopic flow lines in the metal, and that original mint luster becomes part of the visual evidence that a coin has not been heavily handled or improperly cleaned. Strike quality must be evaluated separately because an uncirculated coin can still have areas of softness or incomplete detail caused by the relationship between dies, planchet, striking pressure, and production conditions. For the professional life cent, collectors also pay attention to the architectural detail of the Capitol, Lincoln's figure, the lettering, and the overall sharpness of the design. A hypothetical raw coin that appears brilliant might still fall far short of elite status once magnification reveals contact marks, carbon spots, plating disturbances, or hairline scratches. Conversely, an exceptionally clean coin with strong original red calque can attract serious attention. PCGS records a Philadelphia professional life example graded MS68 red that realized $1,939 at a heritage auction sale on April 4, 2017. That is a verified auction result, not a blanket valuation for the date, and it demonstrates precisely why grade and eye appeal must be considered before anyone assigns a price to an individual coin. The most interesting discoveries, however, can come from varieties and production abnormalities rather than condition alone. Collectors examining 2009 Lincoln cents should understand the difference between a true doubled die and ordinary forms of doubling or damage. Genuine doubled die originates during die creation and can produce consistent, identifiable doubling in specific design areas, whereas machine doubling can occur during the striking process and often creates a flatter, shelf-like appearance that does not represent the same kind of collectible variety. Variety specialists have documented die varieties for the professional life design, and recognized examples can command premiums when their diagnostics are confirmed. Wachsler's die variety research specifically identifies areas around Lincoln's ear, the letters in Liberty, and the date as places worth examining on the obverse, while the reverse should be inspected carefully for possible doubling in and around the Capitol design. That does not mean every unusual-looking professional life cent is a valuable doubled die. In fact, most apparent doubling seen by inexperienced collectors is not a major recognized variety. The same caution applies to mint errors. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad-struck, die cracks, struck-through errors, and other genuine mint-made abnormalities can be collectible, but each must be evaluated on its own evidence. A scratch made after the coin left the mint is not an error, and a damaged copper-plated surface is not automatically a mint mistake. The safest approach is to photograph suspicious features, compare them with established references, and seek attribution from a recognized specialist or professional grading service before assuming a dramatic premium. That discipline is particularly important when a coin begins entering the four-figure range. A genuine, certified high-grade or important variety can attract intense competition, while an unverified coin with an exaggerated claim can be worth only a tiny fraction of the amount suggested by an online listing. Authentication becomes even more important when the numbers begin to rise. PCGS records a 2009 D Professional Life cent graded MS68 red with an auction result of $1,490 from June 9, 2018, while its population information shows that the highest certified examples occupy a much narrower part of the grading landscape than the hundreds of millions originally struck. This contrast is revealing because ordinary Denver examples have also sold for only single-digit or low double-digit amounts when certified in more common grades, demonstrating that the date and D mint mark alone do not create extraordinary value. In other words, a collector might encounter one 2009 D Professional Life cent that is essentially a face value item, and another that, because of certified grade and exceptional preservation, has entered a completely different market. This is why auction records should always be read alongside the grade and certification. Even unusual sales should never be treated as promises about future prices. Market demand can change, registry competition can change, population reports can change as additional coins are submitted, and the final result at auction depends on how strongly bidders want that particular specimen at that particular moment. A coin that appears valuable because of a high online asking price is not necessarily equivalent to a coin that has actually sold through an established auction venue. Collectors should therefore distinguish between asking prices, price guide estimates, and documented realized prices. The Professional Life Cent provides an excellent case study because its ordinary examples remain plentiful, while exceptional certified pieces have demonstrated the ability to reach roughly $1,500 to nearly $2,000 in documented transactions. Those figures belong to specific coins with specific grades and histories. They should never be transferred automatically to every 2009 Professional Life Cent found in circulation. The final question is whether the coin deserves long-term attention, and the answer depends on what kind of collector is holding it. For a casual collector, the Professional Life Cent is an attractive one-year design that completes the four-part Lincoln Bicentennial story. For a specialist, it can become much more interesting when paired with the Philadelphia and Denver issues, the special collector strikes, certified high-grade red examples, and documented varieties. For anyone examining a raw coin, preservation should come before speculation. Handle it by the edges, avoid touching the fields, never polish or chemically clean it, and keep valuable examples in an inert holder or professional encapsulation rather than loose in an environment where moisture, chemicals, or abrasion can attack the copper surface. The copper-plated zinc construction makes environmental care particularly important because damage to the plating can expose the zinc beneath it. Authentication should precede any major valuation claim, especially when a coin appears unusually sharp, unusually red, or shows suspected doubling. And the historical connection should not be overlooked. This small cent captures Lincoln at a pivotal stage, standing in Illinois before the building associated with his political and professional rise, years before he would face the national crisis that defined his presidency. The United States Mint deliberately used the 2009 reverses to tell that progression, and the Professional Life design forms the bridge between Lincoln's early development and his eventual national leadership. That combination of history and condition rarity is what gives the coin lasting collector appeal. A normal circulated specimen may remain a modest collectible, while an authenticated MS-67 or MS-68 red piece, a genuinely recognized variety, or an important mint era can occupy a far more specialized market, with exceptional examples capable of reaching values in the thousands. The documented $1,939 Philadelphia auction result and $1,490 Denver result prove that such premiums have occurred, but they also prove something more important. The valuable coin is not created by the date alone. It is created by the exact combination of authenticity, grade, color, strike, surfaces, variety, population, eye appeal, provenance, and demand. That is the distinction that turns the 2009 Professional Life Cent from a simple piece of pocket change into a serious subject for modern Lincoln Cent collectors. Next up, there is a reason an experienced collector can spend far more time examining a 2009 Lincoln Cent than someone might expect from a coin that was designed to circulate by the millions. Turn the coin over, and the final chapter of the Lincoln Bicentennial program appears. An unfinished United States Capitol dome, frozen at the stage it occupied during Abraham Lincoln's presidency. It is a remarkably small piece of metal carrying an enormous historical tension. The government was constructing the symbol of the nation's capital, while the nation itself was being torn apart by slavery and civil war. The 2009 D designation adds another layer because the tiny D beneath Lincoln identifies Denver as the mint of origin, and modern collectors know that the difference between an ordinary surviving coin and an exceptional one can be hidden in details that are almost invisible without magnification. This particular cent has attracted serious collectors because of its historical importance, its place as the fourth and final 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial reverse, and the scarcity of superbly preserved examples. Later in this examination, we will separate ordinary circulated coins from genuinely desirable certified specimens, look at documented auction results, and explain exactly why authentication, grade, color, surface preservation, strike quality, and population rarity can transform the collecting status of a coin that originally carried only a 1-cent denomination. The mystery is not whether millions were made, they were, but whether the individual coin in front of us survived the journey from the Denver Mint with the extraordinary combination of qualities that advanced Lincoln cent collectors compete to acquire. The story behind the reverse begins with a deliberate decision by Congress to make 2009 unlike any other year in the modern Lincoln cent series. The Lincoln Bicentennial 1-cent program divided Lincoln's life into 4 major chapters, with a different reverse representing each stage: his birth and childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his professional life in Illinois, and finally his presidency in Washington, D.C. The presidency design was released on November 12, 2009, making it the final reverse of the 4-design program. Look closely at the unfinished dome, and the symbolism becomes much more powerful. The Capitol was still under construction when Lincoln entered the White House, and the Mint deliberately used that incomplete architecture to represent a nation whose political structure was itself under extraordinary strain. The Civil War began shortly after Lincoln took office in 1861, and during his presidency, the conflict escalated into the defining crisis of 19th-century American history. The dome continued rising while armies fought across the country, creating a powerful visual metaphor. The physical Capitol was unfinished at the same moment the nation itself was struggling to remain whole. The U.S. Mint described the image as symbolizing a nation torn apart by civil war and Lincoln's resolve while getting the country through its gravest crisis. Lincoln was elected to a second term in 1864. The war ended in 1865, and only days later he was assassinated in Washington. His body was eventually returned to Springfield, Illinois, but before burial it lay in state beneath the Capitol's newly completed dome, giving the architecture on this tiny cent an especially poignant connection to Lincoln's final days. Now examine the coin as a numismatist would rather than simply as a historical souvenir. The obverse retains Victor David Brenner's familiar portrait of Lincoln, the same basic likeness that had appeared on the cent since 1909, with "In God We Trust" above, "Liberty" to Lincoln's left, and 2009 to the right. The reverse is the work of United States Mint Artistic Infusion Program master designer Susan Gamble, and was sculpted by United States Mint sculptor-engraver Joseph Menner. The inscriptions United States of America, EPLUOBUSUNUM, and 1 cent surround the architectural scene, while the Denver D identifies the production facility. Technically, the ordinary circulating coin is a copper-plated zinc cent, approximately 2.5 grams in weight, 19 millimeters in diameter, and struck with a plain edge. PCGS lists the 2009 D presidency circulation issue at a mintage of 198 million pieces. That number immediately tells us something important about rarity. This is not a classic rarity whose scarcity comes from a tiny original production figure. Denver alone struck nearly 200 million circulation pieces, and millions entered everyday commerce. The metal itself is also important. The copper coating is extremely thin compared with the solid copper composition used for special 2009 collector strikes, so the ordinary coin can develop surface problems that look very different from those seen on older bronze cents. The Mint also produced special uncirculated 2009 cents using a 95% copper composition, but those are separate from the standard copper-plated zinc circulation issue we are investigating here. That distinction matters when a collector weighs a suspicious coin, evaluates its appearance, or compares it with photographs and auction descriptions. A difference in color or weight does not automatically mean an error. It may indicate that the coin belongs to a different officially produced 2009 format. With the basic identity established, the next step is to ask why a coin with such a large mintage can become scarce in the marketplace. The answer is condition. Imagine two 2009 presidency cents leaving the Denver Mint together. One falls into a large bag, rubs against thousands of other coins, passes through a counting machine, enters circulation, gets handled repeatedly, and eventually develops dull surfaces, scratches, and discoloration. The other is separated early, protected from contact, and preserved with nearly all of its original mint appearance. Both began as the same denomination and date, but decades of collecting experience have shown that their eventual desirability can be dramatically different. Professional graders place uncirculated Lincoln cents on the mint state scale, where increasing numbers represent increasingly demanding standards for surface quality, strike, luster, and overall preservation. For copper-colored Lincoln cents, the color designation is also crucial. Brown, and red describe the degree to which the coin retains its original copper coloration. A red example with bright, original-looking surfaces can be much more desirable than a similar grade coin that has darkened or developed distracting spots. Strike quality must be evaluated separately. A coin can technically be uncirculated but still show weakness in certain design details, while another may have remarkably sharp architectural lines and lettering. Collectors inspect the Capitol dome, the surrounding lettering, the edges of Lincoln's portrait, the fields, and the smallest marks visible under magnification. Luster is another clue. Genuine original mint luster tends to flow across the surface rather than appearing as an artificial shine created by polishing. A coin that has been cleaned may look brighter, but can lose the originality collectors want. This is why the highest certified grades become a condition rarity rather than a simple reflection of the original mintage. PCGS records a 2009 presidency MS-67 red example that sold through Heritage for $188 in March 2017, while the same general grade has produced other results over time, demonstrating how market prices can vary even among certified coins. At this point, the coin starts revealing the part of its story that most casual owners never see: population rarity. A population report does not tell us exactly how many coins exist in the entire world, because the same coin can be submitted more than once and not every surviving example has been professionally graded. Instead, certification data tells collectors how many examples a grading service has recorded at particular grades and how many are currently known at higher levels. That information becomes extremely important when registry collectors compete for the finest known pieces. PCGS's published information for the 2009 presidency issue shows that MS-67 red examples exist in meaningful numbers, while MS-68 red occupies a much smaller upper tier. One documented PCGS MS-68 red example carried a population of only 3 at the time of the referenced auction record, with none higher. This is precisely where a modern coin can become unexpectedly scarce. The original Denver mintage was enormous, but the number of coins that survive with nearly flawless surfaces, strong strike, brilliant original red color, and the right certification can be dramatically smaller, and the market has proven that collectors will pay for that distinction. The documented auction record for the regular strike 2009 presidency cent is $4,700 for a PCGS MS-68 red example sold by Heritage Auctions on August 10, 2016. That result should be interpreted very carefully. It does not mean a normal 2009 cent is worth thousands, and it certainly does not mean every MS-67 or MS-68 looking coin will approach that figure. It represents a specific authenticated specimen at an exceptional grade in a competitive auction environment. For perspective, another certified MS-67 red example realized $169 at Heritage in April 2023. The difference between those results is the entire lesson. Collector value is created by the exact coin, not simply by the date and mint mark. The careful examination continues with varieties, errors, and authentication, because unusual appearance is not enough to establish rarity. When an experienced collector receives a suspected 2009 D variety, the first instinct should be to document what is actually present rather than decide what the coin must be. Magnification can reveal die markers, double design elements, die cracks, plating disturbances, strike characteristics, or post-mint damage, but these features have to be interpreted correctly. Machine doubling, for example, can create a secondary-looking edge on letters or numbers without being a true double die variety. A genuine double die is created during the die production process and has recognizable characteristics that can be compared with established references. The same principle applies to errors. An off-center strike, clipped planchet, broad strike, die break, or other mint-made abnormality can be collectible if it is genuine and sufficiently dramatic, but a scratch, gouge, corrosion spot, or damaged copper layer that occurred after the coin left the mint is not a valuable mint error. For that reason, collectors should inspect the date, the D mint mark, lettering, architectural details, surfaces, and suspected abnormalities under consistent lighting, then compare them with reliable variety references before assigning a rarity claim. Authentication becomes particularly important once a coin appears to be worth substantial money. Professional grading services examine authenticity, assign a grade, and may attribute recognized varieties, creating a standardized reference point for buyers and sellers. Counterfeit awareness is also important, especially with high-grade modern coins. An altered surface can be made to look unusually bright, a damaged coin can be marketed as an error, and a counterfeit certification label or misleading online description can create false confidence. The safest approach is to treat every extraordinary claim as unproven until the coin itself and its certification can be independently verified. That mindset protects collectors from the most common mistake in modern coin hunting, confusing something unusual with something rare. There is another branch of the 2009 D presidency story that deserves careful separation. The special satin finish coin made for the 2009 United States Mint Special Mint set. This is not the same thing as the ordinary circulation strike. PCGS identifies the Denver satin finish presidency cent as a special strike weighing about 3.11 grams, with a 95% copper composition and a reported mintage of 784,614. Its recorded auction history is far more modest than the extraordinary circulation strike MS-68 red record, with PCGS listing a $245 result for an SB-69 red example sold in 2018. That distinction is extremely useful when examining a coin because collectors sometimes see an unusual color, texture, or weight and immediately assume they have discovered an error. In reality, some differences are intentional products of the mint. The satin finish has a different surface appearance from a normal business strike, and its heavier bronze composition can distinguish it physically from the 2.5-gram copper-plated zinc circulation cent. This is why a scale, careful visual inspection, and knowledge of the mint's production formats can prevent major mistakes. Preservation also becomes critical once a genuinely high-grade specimen has been identified. Never polish the coin, never rub away spots, and never use household chemicals to make it appear brighter. Hold it by the edges, keep fingerprints away from the fields, and store important examples in inert holders or professional slabs where humidity, contaminants, and abrasion are minimized. Copper-plated zinc is particularly unforgiving when the plating becomes damaged because the underlying zinc can react with environmental moisture. A supposedly brilliant coin that has been harshly cleaned may be far less desirable than an original coin with natural surfaces. Long-term collectability depends heavily on originality because advanced buyers are not simply purchasing a shiny object. They are purchasing a documented state of preservation that can be examined, compared, and trusted. When the investigation finally comes together, the 2009 D. Lincoln Bicentennial Presidency cent becomes much more interesting than its face value suggests, but also much more complicated than a simple, rare penny story. The Denver Mint mark tells us where it was made. The 198 million mintage tells us that ordinary examples are plentiful, and the copper-plated zinc composition explains much about how the coin ages and how its surfaces must be judged. The reverse tells the final chapter of Lincoln's life story in the 2009 program, an unfinished Capitol dome representing both a physical structure still under construction and a nation struggling to survive its deepest internal conflict. Then the numismatic evidence takes over. A circulated specimen may have little premium, while a certified MS-67 red can produce results in the hundreds of dollars, as documented by multiple auction records. A truly exceptional MS-68 red example has reached $4,700 in a verified heritage auction. But that extraordinary result belongs to that authenticated high-grade coin and should never be presented as the normal value of the date. The lesson is especially important for anyone examining one at home. Start with the date, confirm the D-mint mark, inspect the capital design and lettering, study the surfaces for contact marks, check the color and original luster, evaluate strike quality, look for legitimate varieties or mint-made errors, and only then consider professional authentication. Do not let a dramatic online asking price determine your expectations, and do not confuse a damaged or cleaned coin with a valuable error. The strongest pieces attract collectors because they combine several qualities at once: authenticity, exceptional preservation, vivid original red color, sharp striking, strong eye appeal, and scarcity at the certified grade level. That is why this final Lincoln Bicentennial reverse remains a compelling modern cent. It carries the historical weight of Lincoln's presidency, the physical evidence of Denver mint production, and a fascinating lesson in how rarity can emerge even from a mintage measured in hundreds of millions. For the serious collector, the coin is ultimately valuable not because every 2009 D example is rare, but because the very best survivors allow us to see how history, manufacturing, preservation, certification, and collector demand can converge on a single tiny piece of American currency. Last coin. Millions of Americans handled the 2009 Lincoln cent without giving it a second thought. Yet the first reverse of the Lincoln Bicentennial program contains details that can make experienced collectors stop, turn the coin under a light, and examine it far more carefully than its denomination would suggest. The birth and early childhood design is instantly recognizable by the simple Kentucky log cabin representing the place where Abraham Lincoln was born and spent the earliest years of his life. But the real numismatic investigation begins when we ask how that particular coin was struck, how well it survived, and whether its surfaces still preserve the qualities that collectors prize. This was the first of 4 new Lincoln cent reverses released during 2009, a year that simultaneously marked the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the original Lincoln cent. The United States Mint released the first design into circulation on February 12, 2009, the exact bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, and the 4 reverses together were intended to tell the story of his life from Kentucky childhood through the presidency. What makes the coin interesting today is not simply that it is old enough to have entered millions of collections, because it is not particularly old by classic coin standards. Instead, collectors have learned that modern rarity can emerge from condition, color, strike quality, certification, and the tiny percentage of coins that survive without the marks and surface problems normally created during mass production and circulation. As we examine this cent, the important questions will gradually become clearer. Which pieces are ordinary survivors, which examples deserve professional attention, and why documented auction results for exceptional specimens can look completely different from the prices associated with everyday examples. The answer is hidden not in the date alone, but in what happened to the coin after it left the mint. To understand why the mint created this particular reverse, we have to step backward 2 centuries, to February 12, 1809, when Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky. The mint's official description identifies the first design as representing Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky from 1809 to 1816, with the log cabin symbolizing the humble environment in which his story began. Lincoln's family later moved to Knob Creek Farm, where the young Abraham performed chores and experienced the hard realities of frontier life before the family moved to Indiana in 1816. The coin therefore deliberately avoids showing the famous president that Americans already knew. Instead, it freezes Lincoln at the beginning of the journey, before law, politics, national fame, and the presidency. That choice became especially meaningful in 2009 because the country was commemorating not only Lincoln's birth, but also the centennial of the first Lincoln cent issued in 1909. Congress had authorized 4 circulating reverse designs, each covering a different stage of his life, creating a one-year visual biography in pocket change. The first design was launched at a ceremony in Hodgenville, Kentucky, near Lincoln's birthplace, and the symbolism of releasing a new cent on Lincoln's exact birthday was difficult to miss. At the same time, the United States was experiencing the severe economic aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, with unemployment rising and Americans becoming intensely conscious of household finances, savings, and the value of money. Against that backdrop, the Mint was putting a historic figure associated with perseverance and national identity onto the smallest circulating denomination. The timing gave the coin an unusual cultural setting, a modern cent produced during an economic crisis, carrying the image of a 19th-century frontier cabin, while commemorating a president whose life had become inseparable from the history of the United States. Now bring the coin closer and examine its physical identity, because before thinking about rarity, a collector has to establish exactly what is being examined. The obverse carries Victor David Brenner's familiar portrait of Lincoln, the likeness that had appeared on the cent since 1909, with "In God We Trust" above the portrait, Liberty beside it, and the date 2009. The reverse presents the Kentucky log cabin, surrounded by United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, 1809, and 1 cent. The reverse designer was Richard Masters of the Mint's Artistic Infusion Program, with Jim Licoretz credited as the medallic artist who sculpted the design. The ordinary circulation version is a copper-plated zinc coin weighing approximately 2.5 grams, measuring 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge. PCGS lists the Philadelphia issue at 284.4 million pieces and the Denver issue at 350.4 million, figures that immediately tell us that neither mint produced a classic low-mintage rarity. The small d mint mark, when present, identifies Denver. Its absence on a circulation strike indicates Philadelphia. There is another distinction that can confuse even careful collectors. The Mint also produced special, uncirculated 2009 cents using the older bronze composition associated with the original Lincoln cent, rather than the copper-plated zinc used for circulation coins. Those special pieces weigh about 3.11 grams and contain 95% copper with tin and zinc. That means a difference in weight should not automatically be interpreted as an error. A collector must first determine whether the coin is a regular circulation strike, a special satin finish example, or a proof. Proof versions were struck at San Francisco and carry the S Mint mark, while the Philadelphia and Denver circulation issues were the coins released into everyday commerce. Establishing that identity is the foundation of the entire valuation process. Once the coin's identity is confirmed, the examination shifts from history to survival. Think about what happened to a freshly struck cent in 2009. It entered bags or rolls, encountered thousands of other coins, moved through banking equipment, counting machines, transportation systems, cash drawers, and human hands, and eventually found its way into circulation. Every contact had the potential to leave a microscopic mark. That is why a modern coin with hundreds of millions originally produced can still become conditionally scarce at the highest grades. Collectors and professional graders look for the evidence of preservation: clean fields, minimal contact marks, original mint luster, strong design detail, and attractive color. Lincoln cents are commonly classified as brown. Red-brown or red depending on how much original copper coloration remains, and for a modern copper-plated zinc cent, maintaining a bright original red appearance can be particularly important. A coin that has been handled, exposed to moisture, or improperly cleaned, may lose the visual qualities that made it desirable when it left the mint. Strike quality is another separate consideration. The cabin's details, lettering, Lincoln's portrait, and the edges of major design elements should be sharp rather than mushy, but sharpness alone does not guarantee a high grade. A coin can have strong detail and still be covered with tiny contact marks, while a seemingly flawless surface can reveal problems under magnification. Professional grading services examine the total picture rather than one attractive feature. The scale rises through mint state grades such as MS60 and upward, with the highest grades reserved for coins showing an extraordinary level of preservation. The surviving population data illustrates the point. PCGS's records for the Philadelphia Early Childhood issue show large numbers of certified coins in the mid-mint state range, while the finest examples occupy a much narrower upper tier. The published condition census includes MS67 red specimens. That is the dividing line between abundance and condition rarity. The mint may have made hundreds of millions, but the market is not competing for hundreds of millions of coins. It is competing for the small percentage that survived exceptionally well. And now the numbers can finally enter the investigation, because the coin's documented market history gives us a useful reality check. PCGS records an auction result of $750 for a Philadelphia birth and early childhood example graded MS67 red, sold on August 4, 2015. That is already far removed from the everyday status of a circulated cent, but it still needs to be interpreted correctly. It does not mean an ordinary 2009 Philadelphia log cabin cent is worth hundreds of dollars. It means that a specific authenticated coin reached that result under specific auction conditions at a specific grade. The Denver issue provides another useful comparison. PCGS records a $646 heritage auctions result for a 2009 D-birth and early childhood cent graded MS67 red on July 12, 2015. A collector might therefore encounter a 2009 D coin and assume the D mint mark itself is responsible for the premium, but that would miss the essential point. The mintage was 350.4 million, so the mint mark alone does not create scarcity. What matters is the combination of grade, color, surfaces, strike, and certification. A later or stronger specimen can behave differently in the marketplace, while a lower grade example may be worth only a small amount above face value. Auction records are historical evidence, not guarantees. Market demand changes, registry competition changes, and population reports change as additional coins are submitted for grading. The same principle applies to the Philadelphia issue, where the published auction record has reached substantially higher than ordinary collector pricing because exceptional certified specimens can become competitive objects for specialists. In other words, when a collector sees a headline number associated with a 2009 early childhood cent, the next question should always be, what exact coin produced that number? Without the grade, color, certification, and sale details, the number tells us almost nothing. There is another reason experienced collectors inspect these cents carefully. Varieties and errors can change the identity of an otherwise ordinary coin, but only when the evidence is genuine. The early childhood design itself does not have a single famous double-die variety that should be casually attributed to every piece showing apparent doubling, so this is an area where restraint is more valuable than excitement. Machine doubling, die deterioration, plating disturbances, scratches, and damage from circulation can create shapes that look unusual under magnification without representing a collectible die variety. A genuine mint error, on the other hand, must have originated during production and can include recognized abnormalities such as an off-center strike, clipped planchet, broad strike, or certain die-related errors. The key is attribution. Collectors should begin with the date and mint mark, then inspect the lettering, Lincoln's portrait, the log cabin, the fields, and the rim under controlled lighting. A digital scale can help distinguish the standard 2.5-gram circulation coin from a special 3.11-gram bronze satin finish issue, but weight alone cannot prove an error. Likewise, an unusually bright surface may indicate original red color, but it can also be the result of cleaning or manipulation. Authentication becomes increasingly important as a coin claimed value rises. A professional grading service can determine whether the coin is genuine, evaluate its condition, assign the appropriate grade and color designation, and provide a certification number that buyers can independently check. Counterfeit awareness matters even with modern sense because valuable high-grade examples create incentives for alteration, and damaged coins can be misrepresented as errors. A serious collector, therefore, does not begin by asking, "How much is this worth?" The better question is, "What exactly is this coin, and can I prove it?" That change in mindset is one of the most important differences between casual coin hunting and professional numismatic investigation. Preservation is where the future of a coin's collectability can be decided, because once a high-quality modern cent is damaged, the original condition cannot simply be restored. Copper-plated zinc requires particular care. Fingerprints should be kept off the fields, the coin should be held by its edge, and polishing, rubbing, abrasive cleaners, chemical dips, or household substances should never be used to make the surface appear brighter. A coin that looks shinier after cleaning can actually become less desirable because collectors value originality, and professional graders can recognize evidence of improper treatment. Important pieces are best kept in inert holders or professionally encapsulated slabs, protected from moisture, chemicals, extreme environmental changes, and unnecessary handling. The special satin finish versions require the same discipline, although they are physically different coins with a bronze composition and a distinctive surface. PCGS records the Denver Satin Finish Early Childhood issue at a reported mintage of 784,614, dramatically smaller than the circulation mintage, with an auction record of $105 for an SB69 red example. That comparison is useful because it shows that mintage by itself does not automatically determine price either. The circulation coin had hundreds of millions produced, while the satin finish issue had fewer than 1 million, yet the market value of each individual specimen depends on what collectors are actually seeking. Special finishes, certified grades, color, and availability all interact. The same caution applies to proofs, which were struck separately at San Francisco and sold in the official Lincoln Bicentennial proof set. The US Mint produced those proofs with the same 4 reverse themes and the older 95% copper composition, giving collectors another distinct category rather than simply another condition of the circulation coin. Understanding these production categories prevents a collector from comparing fundamentally different coins as though they were identical. It also explains why a coin found in a pocket, a coin removed from an original roll, a satin finish example from a mint set, and a proof from San Francisco can all carry the same year and basic design while occupying very different places in the numismatic market. By the time we finish examining the 2009 birth and early childhood cent, the little log cabin has become something much more revealing than a decoration on the back of a penny. It represents the beginning of Lincoln's life, but the coin itself represents the beginning of a 1-year experiment in American circulating coinage, a program that compressed an entire biography into 4 reverse designs and temporarily transformed the familiar Lincoln cent into a chronological portrait of one of the country's most important presidents. The numbers tell us that ordinary examples are plentiful. Roughly 284.4 million Philadelphia circulation pieces and 350.4 million Denver pieces were produced, while special satin finish and proof versions occupy separate collecting categories. Yet the auction records reveal why specialists continue to examine them. A certified Philadelphia MS67 red has reached $750, and a Denver MS67 red has reached $646. Those results belong to exceptional authenticated coins, not every 2009 cent with a cabin on the reverse. The real value equation is far more demanding. Authenticity, mint of origin, grade, color, luster, strike quality, surface preservation, originality, possible variety or error, certification, population rarity, and the level of collector competition at the moment of sale. Even the absence of an obvious rarity can be informative. When a coin is common in circulated condition but scarce at the finest grades, its story becomes one of preservation rather than production. That is exactly what makes modern numismatics so fascinating. Rarity is not always born in the mint. Sometimes it is created by time, handling, chance, and the remarkably small number of coins that survive in extraordinary condition. The Kentucky cabin on this cent reminds us where Lincoln began. The coin's own survival tells us something about how objects acquire historical and financial significance long after they leave the mint. And that is why the next time a 2009 Lincoln cent passes through your hands, the most important thing may not be what you see at first glance. It may be what careful examination reveals beneath it. Keep looking closely. American coinage is full of stories hiding in plain sight.